It's easy to look around and notice everything wrong in your city. In this podcast by Every Neighborhood Partnership, join Grace and Andrew as they invite friends, activists, pastors, leaders, and city workers to discover what's good in the neighborhood. Join us for insightful conversations that will encourage you to see your city and its people in a new way. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to What's Good in the Neighborhood, a project by Every Neighborhood Partnership. Today, we are joined by Chris DeLeon. He is a urban gardener with Fresno Metro Ministry here in Fresno, and he's talking to us all about what it looks like to start, cultivate, and all the amazing impacts and benefits of a community garden. Stick with us.
Welcome to What is Good in the Neighborhood. How are we doing, Grace?
I'm good. How are you, Andrew?
Oh, fantastic. It's great to sit here, have a friend join us. Chris DeLeon has been, he's actually an OG volunteer for EMP, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Saturday sports driver.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Okay. Delivered lunches
awesome.
on a Saturday. That's how I got to know Chris. But he has been a longtime advocate of gardens, creating sustainable agriculture in our valley from back to high school days, and is now doing it with Fresno Metro Ministry. And again, we're in a series here where we're talking about and inviting folks on that aren't part of our drive tour. So we just wanted to have a time to have some longer conversations, get to know your heart, your passion, what drives you to do the work that you do. So welcome. Yeah, just give us a little snapshot of who you are.
Yeah, my name is Chris. I work with Fresno Metro Ministry. I'm the Farm and Gardens Program Director. I've been there for 5 years. Long-term advocate of community gardens, trying to address food insecurity in our low-income communities, specifically in Southwest Fresno, for over 10 years. Since I went to school there, and I grew up in Southeast Fresno, been in Fresno since I was like 4 years old, since my family moved here. So, yeah.
Tell us a little bit, folks that, there are a good chunk of folks that won't know Fresno Metro Ministry. They may not know Yo-ville. Just give us the snapshot. What do you all do under your programming? Where would people see, these gardens around the city, that kind of thing?
Yeah, do you want to know a little bit about Fresno Metro in general?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, so Fresno Metro Ministry is a 501c3 nonprofit community org that focuses on creating healthy places for people, and then also on working with people to create healthy people. Yeah, so our mission is healthy people, healthy places. And so, as you all probably know, that's really complicated. It doesn't it doesn't involve.
It sounds so good though.
Yeah, it's just an easy, right? Oh yeah, healthy place, healthy people, rise, it's fine.
Yeah.
And so a lot of our work is direct community engagement work or direct community engagement work for people to transform their spaces. And so most of our work has ended up going into the food realm. That's been the biggest need that Fresno Metro has seen over time. And so those are the programs that have expanded and have stayed around the longest. Fresno Metro has been focused on a lot of social advocacy work and community engagement work and advocacy work for many years. And so those are the programs that really stuck around, that have the biggest impact in our community. So we have a food recovery and redistribution program where we recover food that's going to be thrown away, that's still edible, that's still really good to use, that's going to be thrown away by grocery stores. So when they have to bring in, the new stuff, or they have something that's sell by date, but it's not used by date, they're still edible, and so they can still be used. And so our org recovers them and then takes them to different food distribution places for emergency hunger relief.
And some of our, if you're a church or a local church or pastor, that could even be a resource, right? You guys go, I've been to sites where, Food to Share shows up, drops off some stuff, and they give it out to residents that day.
Exactly. Yeah, and we pick up from local schools. So we pick up from schools here, any unpackaged foods that didn't get used by the students or the schools, they'll call us and pick it up. We have 5 vans and 5 full-time drivers that all day, that's what they do. They pick up produce. That's how much food waste is happening in our city. And we have a huge food insecurity issue, even if we're in the middle of the agricultural valley, we're known for that. but a lot of the food that's being grown here is not being grown for people here. You know?
Tell us a little bit more about that. Like, that is such a juxtaposition of where we live, what we produce and provide for the world. But how does that play out for residents here in Fresno County?
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with food access, right? And so if there's grocery stores near you, the price of groceries, only because we're surrounded by agriculture doesn't mean that agriculture is not just open for community to come and pick. It's not grown by families for families. It's,
the distribution model like takes it out, right?
It's like a farm will produce a ton of, let's say, oranges, and then a packing company in LA will buy the oranges. So then it gets shipped over there in trucks. Then they cut it up. And then like our district will be like, hey, we want to buy oranges for our students. So then they buy it from somewhere where it's packaged and clean and already processed. And then it ships back over here. And so the food that's being grown around us isn't necessarily being grown by families and sold locally. It's being grown like in large quantities, and then it's being shipped to process, to clean, to package, and then it's being repurchased back. And so that's why we still see these same issues, where if it's a low-income neighborhood, we still have like food insecurity issues and food access issues, even if we're surrounded by them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe even those low-income neighborhoods are filled with people that have been working for those companies that are packaging and distributing that food.
Exactly. Yeah. So the community garden program that we have, and so we have 4 community gardens in the city of Fresno. We have about 14 acres. We have 280 gardeners that use those spaces. Most of them are families that live in apartments and can't grow food in their apartment complex. Most of them are farm labor workers as well. And so they either go to work or work for some kind of packaging company. And then they, in their own neighborhoods, don't really have access to fresh produce. Yet they already know how to grow a lot of fresh produce, right? And they live in apartments where they can't grow them. And so that's why our community garden programs are such a great bridge program, because it takes vacant lots in their communities, and we just are like, okay, let's come up with agreements on how we can use this shared space together, and then they use it together.
Is there a demand for space?
Oh, yeah. They're all full. And we have 180 people on the wait list.
180.
Yeah. 180. I think it's more at this point. Every spring it picks back up to a little more.
It's moving the needle environmentally to have urban spaces and have this really beautiful, fresh garden that's food is being produced in it. That's going to change the environment of that space. But it's also like you're talking about providing food for people in those spaces that don't necessarily have access to grocery stores within their communities.
Right.
Is one outweighing the other? Are the benefits, is it mostly providing food for a community, or is it environmental, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of everything. So
yes, tell us more about that.
Yeah, the reason why we started community gardens is we're an org that focuses a lot on food access and on reducing food deserts. But when I talk to the gardeners, actually, the reason that they garden, it's not because it saves them money. It's not, it does, it's passive, but it's not because it saves them money. It's not because they have access to fresh produce more. It's because it is a direct outlet to mental health benefits. And so when they come to the garden, it gives them another place to go outside of their homes where they can breathe, where they can relax, where they can do some gardening, do some physical activity. They get to focus on the plants. They get to connect with nature. They get to connect with neighbors. Gardens have been the strongest tool that I have found so far to bridge community building in a community that has difficulty trusting their neighbors. Mm-hmm. And so if we're hey, we're facilitating this space, and here's a garden plot, and you can rent it out, $35 a year. This is yours. You grow whatever you want for your family. We provide coaching and compost and everything you need. They're like, okay, great, that's my spot. And then they don't expect oh, I'm going to come in and get to know my neighbors and build community. We don't tell them that because that sounds overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so some people are I don't know if I have time for that.
I don't need another special friend.
Yeah, right? Or it just sounds like a lot. But if we're just this is your space, you can come whenever you want. Here's the code to the gate. You can do whatever. They'll naturally just come, they'll grow, they'll see their neighbors growing, the same people that come around the same time. They'll be like, oh, what are you growing? Oh, this is what I grow. What do you use that for? Oh, here's the recipe that I use. Oh, now I have an abundance. Do you want some? Oh, where do your kids go to school? Oh, how long have you lived here? And that's how the connections start to form. And then eventually those leads to, did you hear what happened on the street? Oh,
Yes.
who is that? How did that happen? How can we help? And it creates a lot like stronger connections and stronger bonds because it gives people something that they have in common with their neighbors to do together.
Yeah, it sounds like you've created a natural hub now, another space where those people can connect that's outside of their homes or on their street.
Right.
Yeah, another safe space. That's really sweet.
What for you? I mean, what did you start? Like, why did this work originally kind of spark your interest? And then now that you've been doing it for 10 plus years, like what keeps you alive and then, pursuing this vision of, more gardens and more access? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was part of Youth Leadership Institute. We were doing community health assessments on our communities, right? And so I went to Edison High School. We were looking at our community's food access and pollution and poverty rates and all of the compounded issues that have happened in Southwest Fresno and that continue to happen to this day. And the food one just seemed so perplexing to me. Like the food access was an issue. And so I was like, okay, we need more grocery stores because that's where people get food. And so as a high schooler, that was my thinking. Like, how do we solve this, just grocery store issue? And as we dug more deeper into access to food and what it takes to build a grocery store in your neighborhood and what it takes for a company or a business to get loans, and then that led us to redlining and the racism that occurred when our city was being planned out and the areas that were marked as danger zones or areas that you don't really want to be in. So
Intentional systemic disinvestment, right?
Exactly.
Like we're not going to give money to folks in this area.
And so it was if you're a business and you're going to start a business here, companies or banks wouldn't give you a loan because, you're in that area that you're probably not going to make it. We're not going to get a return for our investment. Yeah. And so if you mark an area like that on a map, it starts having drastic issues with now businesses can't start there. Now businesses can't revitalize there or upkeep their buildings. If you're a homeowner, you also can't get home loans to revitalize your home, keep it up, or expand or do anything like that. And so it creates this void. And so that's what ended up happening with grocery stores. And it all seemed so complicated as a high school student. So we were
yeah,
why don't we just grow our own food and bypass all of this
system,
And
Yes.
so Youth Leadership Institute was not working on any urban ag projects during the time, but they were if you want to take this on, go for it. And so a couple of friends and I started a garden club at Edison. The principal gave us a space and he was like, okay, yeah, you can use this space to grow food. And then we were like, this is a lot more expensive than we thought. I heard about grants. And so I tried to I was talking to the USDA and I was like, this is really complicated, but I'm going to figure this out. So during that time, we just partnered with I think we partnered with EMP in early days because that was 2011.
Okay. That was prior to my time. But
Yeah.
So sounds right.
They were doing a beautification projects and we invited them to come to our campus and help us do beautification. And we started gardening on just any raised beds that were around already. And then I met Fresno Metro, where I work at now, and they were like, we're actually starting this garden at Lowell. It's a new community garden that's going to be formed. And so we got involved to learn how this process works. And so that's where I was hooked. I was this is...
do you remember I used to have a plot there at Lowell?
Yeah.
I had a community garden plot for about a year.
That's awesome.
It was great.
Yeah. So that's how I was introduced to that world. And then once I met community garden coordinator at Fresno Metro, I was like, that's the job.
I need that job.
That's what I want. I'm doing that. So.
And then now, as you have been in it a while, you've experienced success. I mean, you guys are doing amazing things. You have some new stuff opening and starting here in this next couple of years. But also, you've also experienced the challenges, the hardships, the setbacks, the lack of vision, maybe in the city. What keeps you motivated? Or what is the thing for you?
Yeah. So I think originally it just started as an answer to a problem. So more of a riddle or critical thinking. But now that I've experienced the power of community gardens past just food access. It's now like heart for me. It's like community. It's a way of building community, a way of finding nature within the urban setting. There's been so many people that have come out to our community garden, like specifically Yo-ville, which is the one that it's 7.5 acres, and we've planted a ton of fruit trees, a lot of native plants. We really rewilded that space. And some people come to the garden and just start to cry. If you haven't been out in nature for a while and you find healing, or you hear a bird that your grandma loved, or see plants that remind you of like your grandma or your parents and the way they used to grow food, it's really emotional for a lot of people. And so I think now it has like a place in my heart, like knowing the connections that people have with plants and with food, and how deep it goes and how spiritual it actually is.
Wow, that's deep meaning right there.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about like it changing people's mental health. Is there a story you can share, or you don't have to name a name, but someone that you've seen like this has changed like the way that they interact with others, people in the world?
I don't know if there's like a specific story. I would just say like when we were developing Yo-ville, we met with, so Yo-ville is right behind low-income housing apartments. And then to the left of Yo-ville is low-income farm worker housing. And then also like no grocery stores nearby for more than a mile away. There's a bus that kind of picks people up. And so that's kind of the logistics of that space. And then Yo-ville, the 7.5 acres, was a vacant lot. And right behind Yo-ville is the Foster Farms factory. And so that kind of paints a good picture of where we are, of where that space is at. And so when we first came in and started trying to do Yo-ville, we finally got our permits approved in 2019. We were like, oh, this is exciting. That's when I came into the picture with Fresno Metro to try to launch this project. All of the engagement that had happened in 2016 with the designing of the space and with the residents at the time was now like gone. Like it took 3 years to get through permitting and through all of the logistical stuff. And so it was just like a void. And then we were told by the resident engagement like groups of the people that live in the apartments, or that try to do resident engagement in the apartments. They were like, it's really difficult to engage people, really difficult for people to come out. There isn't a good sense of like trust. And so we were like, okay, well, let's just start by planting some plants and building the garden, and then we'll see. And so we met during that time our first gardener ever, which her name is Patricia Hubbard. She's amazing. She was our very first gardener. So her and her daughter came out, and we met her. She lived across the street, and she was like, I actually would love to garden here. My backyard is full of plant starts, and I've already started.
She's getting ready.
And so
build it and they will come.
Yeah. And so she was, I think, the biggest force in pushing us forward, because as we were like figuring out design stuff, she was like, it is going to be March. That is the time of planting for gardeners. We need to go now. And so we just kind of worked with residents to finish the design, right? Like we got like the main road and pathways in, and then the logistics around how the garden plots look like. We were like, we'll just start planting and see how they take shape and start drawing it out. We quickly ran into some of the issues like vandalism and theft, misunderstandings of what a community garden actually means, because we did get a lot of media when we did a groundbreaking. And so there was a lot of people that would come by and were like, oh, it's a community garden, so I can just like take plants.
Whatever I want.
And we're like, that's not what community means. It means you can come grow with us.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think, a learning curve for a lot of people too, like having to get uncomfortable and like talk to people that came by, answer questions, and also just teach people like what community building is and like what it means to have a community garden. And to this day, we still have those same issues of like, people think it's community means, oh, it's free. Like you can just come and take. And we're like, if you would like to grow with us, we would love to have you here. Yeah. And so it's just been learning like that. And Patricia's still one of our gardeners. She's actually now on our farm incubator program. So now she has a half an acre in the back of Yo-ville. She started her own urban farm called Burning Daylight Farms, and she comes with us to all of the farmers markets we've been putting on. So she sells right now with us at the farmers market with Fort Miller and Fresno High and McLean. Because she quickly outgrew her space and realized, like, actually, I want to give more. I can give more. I can produce way much more than I can eat.
Wow.
Love it.
You mentioned right at the beginning about Yo-ville and how long it took and the permitting. Talk to us about that. Like, what would it take to, if you see a vacant lot in your neighborhood, to make a community garden? What would be the first step someone would take?
First, you have to find out who owns it. And so that part can be tricky, like trying to find the registers for who owns that property. How do I get in contact with them? Sometimes you might get their number, but most of the time you just get an address. You write a letter, send it off, like blessings, hope for the best.
A little holy water. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully they live in town. Most of the time they don't. That's the biggest thing we've learned with like vacant lots is like people just like bought it. It's on some kind of portfolio that they have of a bunch of properties and they just sit on it until it's worth more. Yeah, so I guess one is just trying to find who owns that, get permissions to use it. I know a lot of like community gardens and urban farms and urban ag has like been seen as something temporary for a very long time. And so a lot of the time like developers or people that own land or landowners are like, well, I'm not doing anything with it. And so I'll let you use it for like this long of time. And then it's going to go away. Like we might sell it to a developer. We might put housing. We might do something different. And so that's how it's like urban ag is kind of seen as something temporary. And that's how a lot of groups have been operating up until now, I think.
Just not to interrupt this kind of flow, but like I would love to know your assessment, in such a farm-rich, ag-rich area. Why do we have, like, I was just up in Santa Cruz. I visited this place called Life Lab. We saw their little experimental garden. It's unbelievable, right? Santa Cruz is not known for just space on space on space, but they understand and value small ag and these urban green spaces. What is the Fresno block? Like, why is that a mental framework or a mental vision we don't have? Like, we have so much space. We have the best growing climate. Why do we not do it? Like, what do you think's behind that? Like, why is that a thing that doesn't happen? Like, why do we only have 4 community gardens? We could have 12, 20, 30, right? Like in a city our size.
Yeah. Yes.
But why? Why?
Yeah. No.
Why is that another thing? Like,
that's what keeps me going because I went to Seattle and was like, Seattle has 110 community gardens.
110.
And I was like, I know you guys have a lot of water, but these 110 to 10 is like really different. So we're not the only org that has the community garden models. So the firm also has community garden models that they do more as like refugee gardens. There's like the American Indian Health Project has community garden as well. So there's a couple of other orgs that have like 1 or 2 gardens. I think like Firm and us have the most, and there's so many different models on like urban ag. What we do is we rent out like different garden plots, and that's how we've been found that a lot of people feel most comfortable. Yeah. Some groups also do just like the whole space is shared and you just like come and farm all of it and harvest all of it however you can, whenever you can. But yeah, I think over the years, I've gotten so many people that will reach out to me and be like, hey, I want to start a community garden, but I have no idea where to get started. They go to the city and there's no process. There's no formal process. Even within the city, when you're going through city permits, it's been very difficult. You have to like know someone that knows someone to even get through permitting, because it's just been like, well, if it's agriculture, then it can't be in a residential area because of pesticides and like all of these things that are great. Like they protect people. Like I 100% agree, shouldn't be in residential areas, but we're not using any of that. And we don't have any like systems or processes or flows for like small urban spaces that don't use pesticides, that aren't like tilling, that aren't doing things that are harmful.
So it's not even like on a menu of options. Right. This kind of your thing is like, it's not even in people's imagination that this is how you could reclaim space.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, like how do you even get started? I know we have a how to start a community garden guide. And even that, we're still working on like revamping it. We would love for there to be like an online, like you go to this website and you're like, this is my situation. Like, do you have this on that? Like, do you have access to land already? Yes or no? Do you already have water hookups? Yes or no? Yeah. Do you, and then it gives you like, okay, here's what you got to do next.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so I think that would be great. And then also, if there was a way for people to get access to vacant lots, like some kind of public process, would be great. I don't know, but there really isn't. I think a lot of the times people don't even know where to start.
And you all are also facilitating like a network that's trying to work on some of these issues, right? The food security network.
Yeah. And so over the years of doing all of this food work, we've recognized like we can't do it alone. And a lot of it is systemic and a lot of it is policy. And so the Food Security Network was a group that was kind of birthed to collaborate with everyone else in the city that's doing something similar so that we can kind of coordinate efforts, like not have to recreate the wheel, like really be able to collaborate and then also eventually be able to like do more systemic changes, right? And so like, influence things like city zoning and also on like land use and like how do we give access to more people to do these things or how do we work with the city? Because what I found so far, like the city is really receptive. The people at the Department of Planning are like really open to talking to us, meeting with us. They've told us like what we got to do to work with them. It's just a lot of it is like capacity and also like building community. And also it's difficult to like run a city. Like you have to,
because what you're saying is like you actually need to get zones, like how what a plot is zoned, or we actually need to add code. I remember we were having a conversation about chickens. Yeah. It's like it'd be great to have. I may or may not have backyard chickens, but it would be great. No one has. I definitely don't have backyard chickens.
I don't either. Nobody does. None of my neighbors do either.
Yeah, exactly. But let's say if we wanted that to be legal, the city would actually have to have a zoning ordinance for that, right? And so, but that takes the city staff time. They're not working on that. But so, yeah, how do we as community members advocate for those changes? And that begins to change the policy, the framework, which leads it to happen sooner, hopefully.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of know-how. And like, how do I even know how to change the city? Where do I even find the code? It's like, like not a lot of people know these things. We're all like playing by rules that we don't have a guidebook for. Until we get cited, then we know.
Well, we wouldn't know anything about that. I'm thinking about the person who's listening, who's like, that sounds really beautiful. It sounds really idealistic. What do you say to people that are wondering, like, is this the biggest issue? Like, why do we spend our time here? Why does it matter that people would have urban garden? And like you said, I think at the beginning, you're like, it changes everything. Mm-hmm. So yeah, why, like for people that are like, it's cool. Is it the thing? Mm-hmm. Like, why is it the thing for you?
Yeah. So there's just going back to the center of like just food access. So it provides access to food for people that don't have access to food in their neighborhood. So if you were to go and look at our community gardens, a lot of the gardeners are growing like staple foods. So it's not some herbs and flowers and like pastime stuff. It's like really like corn, squash, like potatoes, like things that like really add caloric value to their meals, and that they really start to depend on. We've also like surveyed our gardeners and asked like where do you get your produce? And the garden becomes the first, like the majority of their produce and vegetables come from their garden plots. And then second, like the grocery store that they frequent. So there's that. Also, like it breaks my heart for children not to know where their food comes from. So I worked at CalFresh before working at Fresno Metro. So many kids think that their produce comes from the store. And then you're like, where does it come? Where does it go from the store? From a factory. And how did it get to the factory? People made it. It's like, how did it get made? And there's like a void of connection between people and their food. So there's a huge reliance on like the major system. Same with like whenever there's like fluctuations in price, right? And so if we're really, really set on like, I get all of my stuff from the grocery store, we don't know how to connect with our food, we don't know how to grow anything, then it really makes us reliant on like actually really fragile food system that is not like, it's not, it has a ton of food waste, and there's a ton of people that are left out that then have to go get food from emergency food recoveries, right? Yeah. And so,
who are often, as you said, the ones actually growing, like those on the margins are actually the ones who are actually producing our food. Exactly. They become the factory, and that's not the system we want.
Right. Yeah. And then also like, nobody wants vacant lots in their neighborhoods. Vacant lots aren't doing anything for us. They're just sitting there. And so if we use those spaces to bring back green spaces, right, bring back more plants, bring back more butterflies, more bees, it creates a greater sense of connection. It also helps with mental health benefits, like just by living next to a green space that you can walk by through, that you can connect with, that you can have some time to sit. There's so many benefits, even up to like climate change, right? Like planting more trees absorbs more carbon dioxide, like not tilling the ground all the time, like really stores carbon under the ground. Like when it rains, the water gets stored there and it starts going underground, on and on and on. We can talk about the benefits of community gardens, community gardens with the art and connection to art and connection to culture. We have Hmong gardeners and like Latino Hispanic gardeners, and they're able to grow culturally relevant crops. A lot of our Hmong gardeners don't have a grocery store nearby that sells Hmong produce. And so they pass on the seeds and the knowledge through their families and through their meals, through their gardens. These gardens provide community that speaks in the same language. Yeah, we can keep going.
Well, and yes. I'm ready to raise my pitchfork for this revolution. I think what I so appreciate too about you, Chris, and about Metro as an organization is that you guys listen to people. So I think even beyond the like gardens are amazing, and I think cheers to that. But it's also where EMP and Metro have had such a hard alignment is you listen to folks, you give people to be themselves, and you create spaces of connection. And we know like those small drips change the world. It's small. It always starts small. It's never going to be, but we start one garden at a time, one connection at a time. And that stuff changes our community, and it changes the DNA, the ethos, and then like literally the ground. The soil becomes richer, right? Mm-hmm. So good.
And it's such a good challenge to like, we are so used to the food, like the industrial complex of food, that to think of food as like not just a hobby, but it actually allows people to eat. Like what you're talking about it, like the food that they're growing is, changing the caloric intake of their bodies. Mm-hmm. That's huge, because I think there's a lot of people that think that it's just a hobby. And so to change our own mindset and the way that we think about it and put ourselves in the shoes of other people, so important. So I really appreciate you laying it out for us like that. And I love hearing your passion about it too.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. It also, fresh produce from a garden tastes so much better.
Yes. So much better.
Just even by taste preference, you're like, this is... Tomato from your garden is 100% way better than any grocery store tomato.
I have 25 fruit trees in my backyard. And so the best is like getting an apricot that you could never sell because those things get mushy in a day. But it's just apricot juice running down your face. There's never a better fruit than
peak ripeness. Or you could not do that in our industrial food model.
Because it has to ship 2 weeks before it's really fresh, right? We can keep ranting. But how do folks, like you guys are, again, we dipped our toe into some of the things you're doing. You're doing a lot more than what you've said. How do we learn more? If folks wanted to either come and volunteer out at Yo-ville or, get on that list now, how would they do that?
Yeah, so they can visit our website, fresnometman.org, to find out about all the different programs we have. We also do cooking demos. We also do cooking classes to try to reconnect people to like actually handling produce. We help people sign up for CalFresh, and then we have the Gardens program. We're also working with a lot of neighbors on Blackstone and how to redevelop Blackstone to be a more pedestrian-friendly place. And so you can find information about all of our other efforts on our FresnoMetman.org website. And then as far as like getting involved or getting on the list, they can contact me from on there as well. My email and contact information is on there. If they want to get added to our infinite wait list. One day we're going to bring everyone together and we're going to be like, we got to get more spaces. We have volunteer days every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at the Yo-ville Community Garden. So that one's 7.5 acres. So that's where we have a lot of our programming. We have workshops. We have trainings if someone doesn't really know how to garden, but they kind of want to just learn and work with us to see. We're there every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday from 8 to 11 a.m. And they can follow us on social media, the Yo-ville Community Garden. We do have We have an Instagram and a Facebook. So they can find us on there. We post all of our workshops on there.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Chris. And thanks for being on the drive tour. And so if you haven't already, download it, go to Voice Map, and we'll also include a link to the drive tour in the podcast description. But yeah, thanks for being on the tour. And I've already seen some photos of folks walking around the garden who have never been out there. So we're excited for folks to be exposed to that too.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right, see y'all.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to find out more about EMP, you can visit us at everyneighborhood.org or follow us at EMP Fresno. Every Neighborhood Partnership and this podcast exists to activate, equip, mobilize, and transform here in Fresno and beyond. If you liked what you've heard, please share and review what's good in the neighborhood wherever you listen. We'll see you next time.